Once upon a time, in a world of Pokemon, a young trainer sets out on a magical journey throughout the islands of Alola. But this was no ordinary adventure. This was a fairy tale. A hardcore Nuzlocke challenge where it's up to only the fairy-type Pokemon to overcome their daunting challenges and fierce battles, on the quest to become the very first champion of the Alola region. Now, join us on this adventure and let's begin. We choose Popplio as our starter, which isn't a fairy-type yet, but it will be eventually, so we allow it for this challenge, and we name it Prince Charming. Hal, of course, wants to battle us, but Prince Charming already has Water Gun and makes short work of his Litten, and not much changes for the second battle either. We can't actually catch our first fairy type until Route 2, which is after two very difficult fights against the school teacher and Ilima. But there really isn't anything we can do about it, so we just speed through them and catch our first encounter, Cutie Fly. We name it Tinkerbell, not Tipkerbell, I assure you. And now it's time to take on our first trial. Level caps are a bit weird to place in the Alola game, but it seems that most people set it at the Totem Pokemon's level. So as long as I start the trial at or below the level cap, we're okay, and our Pokemon can level up during the trials themselves, which get increasingly more difficult to get through without losing any Pokemon as the game goes on. Our first trial is against the Totem Pokemon Gumshoos, which starts the battle with a defense boost, so we send in the special attacking Tinkerbell. I start off with a Stun Spore, and it lowers our speed and calls for backup. We go for Silverwind to try to get the Omni Boost, and we get it on the first try. Then a second brings the Totem Pokemon to the yellow, and they just keep lowering our speed. But one more Silverwind is enough to get the KO on the Gumshoos, and then the same goes for Yungoos, completing our first trial and gaining the Normalium Z. Next is a very crucial encounter on Route 3. It's a Cottony, which we catch and we name Pinocchio. After another very easy victory against Hau, Prince Charming evolves into a Brionne. And now it's time to take on the Kahuna of Melemele Island, Kahuna Hala. He leads with the Mankey and we send in Tinkerbell. Now this really shouldn't be too difficult of a battle. We obviously have a great type matchup here. So Mankey quickly falls to two Fairy Winds, and in comes his Makuhita, who is quite a bit bulkier than Mankey, but still falls to a few Fairy Winds. Next is Crabrawler. Tinkerbell starts it off with a Stun Spore, and now has to tank his Z move, all out pummeling, which crits. Hala full heals, and then Tinkerbell just starts chipping away with Fairy Wind, and after healing, the Crabrawler eventually goes down, completing our Melee Grand Trial and earning the Fightinium Z. Back in 10 Carat Hill, we get our next team member, a Carbink, which we do catch and name Humpty D. Gala Island is home to three much more difficult challenges, so we have to stack the team with three new encounters. First is an Igglybuff on Route 4 named Ursula. An egg from Paniola Ranch hatches into an Eevee and then evolves into a Sylveon, and we catch a Morlul in Brooklet Hill named Maleficent. And now that we have a bit more of a safety blanket, it's time to take on our next trial, the Totem Wishy-Washy, which also starts with a defense boost, so we send in Pinocchio and set up a Leech Seed. And thankfully all it does is growl before calling backup, so we set up a Cotton Spore and it just keeps growling, which is fine until a Water Gun does massive damage to Pinocchio. We stay alive thanks to our Berry, Leech Seed, and Mega Drain recovery, but it is a delicate balance trying to out-recover the rain-boosted Water Gun damage. Eventually, we do bring it down low enough to deactivate Schooling, and the rest of the battle is a cakewalk from there. So we complete our first trial in Akala and earn the Waterium Z. Up next is Kiawe's Fire Trial against the Totem Salazzle with a special defense boost, which is really scary for us being a fairy team against a Totem Poison type. We lead with Prince Charming, who isn't technically a fairy type yet, but we take a Flame Burst before nailing the Salazzle with a strong Scald. It calls for backup and then hits us with a Toxic, but we're prepared and we gave Prince Charming a Pecha Berry, which heals the poison and prevents the incoming Venoshock from KOing us. One more Scald knocks out the Salazzle, and now it's just the Salandit left to deal with, which falls quickly to one Scald, completing our second Akala trial and earning the Firium Z. Before our next trial, we have two more evolutions, Ursula into a Jigglypuff and Maleficent into a Shiinotic. Mallow's Grass trial is up next against the Totem Lurantis, which is a famous run killer. The best plan that I could devise for this fight is Peter Pan. Work up, protect, avoid the Solar Blades, hopefully get lucky and avoid some Supersonics from Trumbeaks, and maybe even get some Infatuation turns off of Cute Charm. But it's gonna be really luck dependent. So here we go. Lurantis starts off with a +2 speed and we send in Sylveon. First we go for Protect to block the instant Power Herb Solar Blade, then Lurantis calls in Trumbeak. So now we set up a workup. Sadly we do get Screeched, but thankfully we dodge a confusion and then hit the Trumbeak with a draining kiss, bringing Peter Pan back up to full health thanks to its big root. Then we protect on the Solar Blade. Now after taking a pluck, we're going to work up again, predicting another Solar Blade, which we then of course protect, and our plan is working perfectly so far. We even get a lucky infatuation turn from Trumbeak. We dodge another confusion, then hit Lurantis with a draining kiss. We probably should have gone for another workup here, but it's time to protect again. This time we do go for the workup as Trumbeak is in love again. But I mean, who can blame him? Look at Peter Pan. Just look. I can't even deny how luckily this battle is turning out so far, but we protect again, and then we repeat this process a few more times. Trumbeak is still in love, and Peter Pan can knock out the Lurantis with a draining kiss, as well as the Trumbeak, completing the third Akala trial and earning the Grassinium Z. And then our cutie fly finally evolves into a Ribombee, and we find our next encounter a Comfey, whatever, which we never use. And now it's time to take on the Akala Grand Trial against Kahuna Olivia. She leads off with her Nose Pass, who hits Maleficent with a Rock Slide, so we reply with a disappointing Mega Drain. She paralyzes us, but we do have a Cherry Berry. Then we confuse the Nose Pass and she full heals. We hit it with another Mega Drain, and then we just trade Thunder Waves. It hits us with a few weak Rock Slides and we set up the Parafusion. And then we continue chipping away at it with Mega Drain. Eventually the stubborn Nose Pass goes down. Boldore comes out next and nails us with a Headbutt, but Mega Drain keeps us healthy and deals a lot of damage. Sadly, we do get unlucky with a Paralyze and a Flinch, so we have to switch out into Humpty D to eat the Headbutt and then knock it out with a Smackdown. She sends in her Lycanroc, and we predict the Z-Mood and go for Protect, which works like a charm. Sadly, Humpty D can't keep up with Lycanroc's damage output, so we switch into Prince Charming, who gets absolutely nailed by a crit. So we switch into Peter Pan, and not only do we get a lucky Quick Claw proc, then we get not one, but two Rock Throw misses, which honestly might have just saved the run. So with that, Lycanroc goes down, completing our grand trial and earning the Rockium Z. Hal challenges us to a battle here, and I skipped the last few just because they were embarrassingly easy, but his team has made some upgrades, most notably this terrifying Alolan Raichu. It hits Tinkerbell hard with an Electro Ball, and we respond with a Pollen Puff, which just barely misses the knockout. And then he withdraws his Raichu for some reason, but either way, now it's Torracat. So we send in Prince Charming to eat his Z move, Inferno Overdrive. Then after flinching from a bite, Prince Charming can knock it out with a Scald. In comes Leafeon, the second best evolution, and we switch back to Tinkerbell, who takes way too much damage from quick attacks before missing another knockout with Pollen Puff. So we switch to our Eviolite Cottony, who eats a crit and a Giga Drain, but deals pathetic damage with Fairy Wind. I try to poison Leafeon, which apparently you can't do. Whoops. So we switch to our own evolution, who tanks 2 hits and hits with a Draining Kiss, but this thing just won't go down. One more finally does the job, and now the Raichu comes back out. Peter Pan tanks an Electro Ball and then knocks out the Raichu, defeating Hal. Up on Mount Hokulani, we find our next encounter a Cleffa, which we name Snow. And then Mullane forces us to battle his nightmare fuel of a team full of Steel types. He leads with Skarmory, and we send in Prince Charming. We set up 3 workups and then nail the Skarmory with a Scald, which luckily gets a burn, so the sturdy bird falls. Out comes Metang, who survives a +3 Scald and hits us with 2 bullet punches before going down. Next up is Alolan Dugtrio. I tried to encore it into Sucker Punch here, but ended up going for Mud Bomb. That was not part of the plan, so we switched to Maleficent, who dodges the next one. Then it just starts chipping away with Mega Drain while taking Mud Bombs. Eventually, the Dugtrio goes down. We defeat Mullane and head into our next trial, Sophocles' Electric Trial, against the totem Pokemon Vikavolt. We lead with Humpty D, who is already damaged from the previous trial battles. We set up a Stealth Rock, which was pretty dumb actually, I don't know why I did that, but then we use our Z move, Continental Crush, which barely does anything to the Vikavolt. And we get paralyzed. So, out to Pinocchio, who then manages to land a Poison Powder through the accuracy drop, but gets hit hard by a Bug Bite, so we switch to Peter Pan. Right into a Bug Bite, and give Vikavolt our Citrus Berry. Yeah, we're not doing too well on this one so far. And then it gets paralyzed, and hit hard by Vikavolt and Charjabug, and then fully paralyzed again. This is not going well. If we don't turn it around right here, the run could be over. So I switch out into Maleficent, and after taking 2 strong hits, we have to switch again into Tinkerbell, who can finally take down the Totem Vikavolt with a Pollen Puff. Eventually, the Charjabug finally falls as well, completing our trial and earning the Electrium and Steelium Z. I honestly can't even state how lucky we are to still have all of our team members. This has been an incredibly crazy and lucky run so far, but it's not over yet. Time to take on the leader of Team Skull, Guzma. He leads off with his Golisopod and we send in Humpty D, who protects first turn. We have to risk it for the biscuit here. Humpty D barely survives the Razor Shell and we get off our Continental Crush, which continues to disappoint. And we switch to our Eviolite Prince Charming to eat the Razor Shell. The next one does get a defense drop and we just barely don't get it below half with the Disarming Voice, but we have to risk it again. And I don't know if my heart can take any more of these close calls. One more attack activates its emergency exit and Guzma sends in Ariados. So we switch to Tinkerbell. Shadow Sneak doesn't do too much and we go for a Psychic. Survive one more and then take it out. The terrifying Golisopod comes back in and I'm not ready to sack one of my beloved team members just yet. So I switch into Peter Pan, who takes way too much damage. There may be no other way out of this, it's just too strong. I send in Maleficent, and she gets her defense dropped right away. The next one does massive damage and gets another defense drop. Mega Drain doesn't do enough, and I think the dreaded time has finally come. I can't switch to Baby Snow, she'll go out instantly. I have no other choice. Maleficent sees that her time has come, and she bravely sacrifices herself for the sake of her teammates. No, her friends, her family. Now, with the clean switch in, Tinkerbell is able to outspeed and avenge her sister's death. Guzma is defeated, but at what cost? We lay Maleficent to rest and bring Pinocchio back onto the team, who we evolve into Whimsicott, promising to fill Maleficent's shoes. Next up in Tapu Village, we catch our next encounter of Vulpix and name him Robin. Little Snow finally evolves into a Clefairy and then into a Clefable. But our trials aren't over yet. It's time to take on Acerola's Ghost Trial. In the back of the store, we find the Totem Mimikyu, who starts the battle with an Omni Boost. I lead off with Pinocchio and set up a Leech Seed. Then it calls in Haunter as backup and hits us with a strong Play Rough. We break Mimikyu's disguise, but we get put to sleep. So we have to switch into Humpty D, who takes massive damage from the Play Rough, and there's not much else we can do, so I go for the double protect, and it fails. Humpty D gets brought down to 1 HP and then falls asleep. So we switch out into Prince Charming and take massive damage from a Play Rough and a Nightshade. But with Leech Seed up, it's just a waiting game and trying to survive long enough, so I protect. We only need a little bit more time, so I switch into Snow, who dodges the Play Rough. Then it's able to take one more and take out the Mimikyu. What a debut moment for Snow. I switch into Peter Pan and take down the Haunter, completing our trial and earning the Ghostium Z. But we're not quite done with the Thrifty Megamart yet, so we go right back in to find our next encounter, a very rare Mimikyu who we name Alice. After defeating the pathetic Plumeria, our starter Prince Charming finally evolves into a Primarina. But now it's time to head to Po Town. Time to avenge our fallen sister Maleficent and take on Guzma once again. He leads off with Golisopod and we send in our new team member Alice. We set up a Swords Dance, expecting a first impression, but it actually goes for Swords Dance, which is bad. So Alice hits it with the Shadow Claw, hoping to activate emergency exit, but no. Disguise blocks the Razor Shell, but not the defense drop. Thankfully, Alice outspeeds and we can get the Golisopod out of here, sending in Ariados, who does massive damage with a Shadow Sneak, and so do we with a Shadow Claw. I could risk it and Shadow Sneak myself, but I decide against it and I send in Prince Charming, who can take it out with a Sparkling Aria. In comes Golisopod, so we protect, expecting the first impression again, and this time guess correctly, and we're able to take it out with a Disarming Voice, defeating Guzma once again. After we defeat Gladion, Robin evolves into my favorite fairy type, Alolan Ninetales. And then we head to the docks where Nanu decides to jump us. He leads with Sableye and we send in Prince Charming, who can take down the Sableye with just 2 Sparkling Arias. Next up is Krokorok, which I'm pretty sure outspeeds us, so we play it safe and we switch to Pinocchio, who just destroys it with the Giga Drain. Persian comes out next, so we protect for the fake out, and then take a Power Gem and set up a Leech Seed. Then protect again to recover and chip. And then Giga Drain. You see the idea here for Pinocchio: slowly sap the opponent while recovering its own health. Eventually the Persian does go down to a Giga Drain, defeating Nanu, completing the Grand Trial, and earning the Darkinium Z. And now the three Musketeers head over to Aether Paradise so Gladion can conquer his mommy issues. We have to take on Guzma once again, but our team is getting a lot better, and this battle was honestly the easiest out of the three, so we're just gonna skip it. And then Lusamine goes insane and unleashes an interdimensional apocalypse onto the world, so we have to take her down. She leads off with Clefable, and we send in Pinocchio. And Pinocchio does what Pinocchio does best, and sets up a Leech Seed. And then we switch into Alice as Clefable continues to buff its defenses, so we get up a Swords Dance, and then Clefable breaks our disguise with a metronome. I'm not too scared of what Clefable can do to Alice, so we go ahead and set up to +6 attack. After a few more weak metronomes, we hit it with a Shadow Claw, and then it fire blasts, but we survive and can take down the Clefable. Mismagius comes in next and doesn't stand a chance against a +6 Shadow Sneak. Next is Lilligant, and I'm not confident Alice can one-shot it, so we switch into Tinkerbell, who takes a lot of damage from a Petal Dance, but then just takes it out. Now in comes the problem, Milotic. So we switch back to the Bunker Buster Pinocchio, hit a Giga Drain, and set up a Leech Seed. Just kidding, it misses, so now we have to Giga Drain again, but eventually the Milotic falls to Pinocchio's Giga Drains, and then she sends in the hard-hitting Beware. Beware doesn't actually have any moves that can touch Alice, so we send her in and very slowly start to chip away, but it ends up in an attack boosting and lowering fest, and I don't have that kind of patience, so I switch into Prince Charming, who gets absolutely nailed by a takedown, and then retaliates with a sparkling aria. This might have been a mistake. So we send back in Alice and resume the stat fest and chip it with Leech Life. Eventually the Beware does go down and we defeat Lusamine. Our final encounter comes in the Pony Wilds. It's a Grand Bull that sadly does not have Intimidate, which would have made it a lot better, but we just chuck a Master Ball at it anyway. Now Hapu wants to take us on with her team of ground types, so we of course lead off with Prince Charming, and after taking a strong Earthquake, knock out her lead with a sparkling aria. Out next is Mudsdale, so we protect on the Tectonic Rage, and Prince Charming just barely holds on, but then responds with an Oceanic Operata and elegantly destroys the Mudsdale. Up next is Flygon, so we switch out into Robin, and after taking 2 Earth Powers, he takes down the Flygon in 1 Ice Beam. Finally, out comes her Gastrodon, and we switch to Pinocchio. Muddy Water barely does anything to it, and it falls in 2 Giga Drains, defeating Hapu and completing our Grand Trial, earning the Groundinium Z. Our next trial is against the Totem Pokemon Kommo-o, which starts the battle with an Omni Boost once again, and we lead off with Prince Charming, and the Coward just protects and calls for backup. So then we hit it with a quad effective Moonblast, then destroy the Totem Pokemon, as well as his backup, completing the trial very easily and earning the Dragonium Z. After a lot of crazy interdimensional plot lines, it's time to take on Ultra Beast Lusamine, who leads off with Clefable, and we send in Alice and set up a Swords Dance. And then we hit Clefable with a Never-Ending Nightmare, which does a little over half. Clefable keeps boosting its defenses and healing up, so we raise our attack again. Clefable busts our disguise with a Moonblast, and we do pretty good damage with a Shadow Claw. After taking one more Moonblast, the Clefable falls to Alice, who's now at +4 attack and can easily one-shot the Mismagius with a priority Shadow Sneak. Up next is Lilligant, who hits us with a Leech Seed, and we respond with a Play Rough that misses. And then confuses Alice, but she breaks through and then one-shots it with a Play Rough. Now it's time for Milotic. It's too dangerous to stay in, so I switch into Pinocchio on a Hydro Pump, which does over half. Thankfully, we outspeed and can get enough Giga Drain recovery to be safe. And after just a few more attacks, the Milotic falls. Next up is Beware. I protect a Scout and then hit it with a Moonblast. It just pain splits, so we can knock it out in one more, defeating the jellyfish monster Lusamine. After some more plot, it's time to take on Gladion on our way to the Elite Four. I skipped his last few battles just because they were too easy, but his final team is much more dangerous. He leads off with his Crobat, and we send in Humpty D. He misses his first Rock Slide and takes a few Cross Poisons before doing good damage with another Rock Slide. We have to take a pretty big risk here and another Cross Poison before we can take it out with a Power Gem. And Humpty D just barely survives the hail damage. In comes Weavile, so we switch to Prince Charming. After taking some weak attacks, he one-shots the Weavile with a Moonblast. Now it's time for his ace, Silvally, which is very dangerous. We're too weak to stay in, but switching into an attack also has its risks. So we decide to switch into Robin, who takes huge damage from a multi-attack, but thankfully dodges the second, and we bring down Silvally to the red. He switches to Lucario, and we switch to Alice, who thanks to Disguise doesn't take any damage from his Z move, which is pretty broken if you ask me. So then we respond with our own Never-Ending Nightmare, which just barely misses the one shot, but we're able to take it out with a Shadow Sneak on the next turn, and same goes for Silvally, defeating Gladion. We have one more fight before taking on the Elite Four, our final battle with our rival Hau. He leads off with Raichu and we send in Tinkerbell. We set up a Quiver Dance and it hits us to about half with a Psychic. Then we can get a clean one-shot with Pollen Puff. Incineroar comes in and there's really nothing that we can switch into to take a Z move, so we have to go for it. A +1 Savage Spin Out from Tinkerbell just barely doesn't KO, which sadly does mean that Inferno Overdrive takes out our little Tinkerbell and hands us the second death of the run right before the Elite Four. Definitely not ideal. So now that I'm looking back at this, I see what the problem is. I thought that I had to get a clean switch in for Alice so we could set up Swords Dances and then kind of sweep the rest of his team. But as you'll see here, that's not actually what happens. So in reality, we just threw away Tinkerbell, which is really disappointing, but that's what happens in Hardcore Nuzlockes. But now we can get a clean switch in into Alice, who can get a Swords Dance up thanks to the Disguise and take a Flare Blitz, and then take out the Incineroar with a Shadow Sneak. In next is Kamala, which is way stronger than you might think, so we switch into Pinocchio, who can take its hits fairly well while staying healthy with Giga Drains. After hitting each other back and forth, Pinocchio can knock it out and survive the hail damage thanks to the recovery. Leafeon is up next, so we switch into Robin, who just barely can't KO with an Ice Beam, but one more does the trick, defeating our rival Hau. And now it is finally time to take on the Elite Four of the Alola region. Up first, we challenge Hala and his fighting types. He leads off with Hariyama and we send in Pinocchio. We protect on the Fake Out and then set up a Leech Seed. We take pretty big damage from close combat, but Big Root Leech Seed is just busted and keeps Pinocchio healthy. Then we fire off a big Moonblast, and after Leech Seed damage, the Hariyama falls. In comes Crabominable, and we protect on the Ice Hammer. I don't think Pinocchio can take one, so we switch it out into Humpty D, who doesn't take it well at all either. So we switch right into Alice, who is immune to the Fighting type Z move, which is so awesome, and we get a free switch with our Disguise intact. So we take advantage of this and go for a Swords Dance, and then Ice Hammer misses. This couldn't be going any better if we're being honest, so we decide not to get greedy and just take it out with a Play Rough. Next up is Poliwrath, who also falls to one Play Rough. Then Primeape comes in, finally breaks our Disguise, and Play Rough misses. So now we have to take some punishment before we can knock it out with a Play Rough. Up next is Beware, and we send in Granbull, who definitely has a nickname, don't worry, we for sure did not forget to name it. She does okay damage with a Play Rough, but not enough, so we set up with a Bulk Up and take another strong Hammer Arm. After Lefty's recovery, we risk it and go for a Play Rough, but it's not quite enough. So after Hala heals, we misclick Brick Break, and then bring it back to the red with a Play Rough. Eventually the Beware falls, and we defeat Hala. Up next is Mommy Olivia and her rock types. She leads with Relicanth, and we send in Pinocchio, who easily takes it out with a quad effective Giga Drain. And then it's Lycanroc. We predict the Z move and protect, and then we outspeed it and hit it with a Giga Drain. We take some big damage from Stone Edge, but recover almost all of it back with Giga Drain, knocking out the Lycanroc. She sends in Carbink, so we set up Leech Seed, and it sets up Reflect. So then we start alternating Protect and Giga Drain to maximize damage and recovery. The Carbink falls to Leech Seed, and in comes Probopass. We once again set up Leech Seed, and then we get paralyzed. And then we do the exact same thing. Alternate Protect and Giga Drain. As long as we don't get fully paralyzed, we should be okay. But I decide not to risk it and send in Granbull, who knocks it out with a Brick Break. Next up is Alolan Golem, and it does big damage with Thunder Punch that Granbull can't quite match with a Brick Break, so we switch back to the paralyzed Pinocchio. And you guessed it, set up Leech Seed. We somehow still outspeed, but we get fully paralyzed. Thankfully, Big Root Leech Seed is absolutely busted, and we can take out the Golem with a Giga Drain, defeating Olivia. Up next is Acerola and her ghost types. She leads off as Sableye, and we send in Robin. It fakes out, and then we set up a Calm Mind. It does hit us with a Confuse Ray, but we were prepared with a Parasm Berry, so then we could knock out the Sableye with a Dazzling Gleam. Next is Delmise, who after a few Ice Beams and Acerola healing, actually gets frozen, so we actually take advantage and set up another Calm Mind. But of course it thaws out immediately and brings Robin low with a Slam. But then it falls to one more Ice Beam. Up next is Palossand, which easily falls to 1+2 Ice Beam. In comes Frostlass, and this is a risk, but barring a crit, we should survive a Shadow Ball and hit Frostlass with a Toxic, which is exactly what happens, and then we switch into Carbink. Acerola heals the poison damage and confuses Humpty D, who then hits himself, dodges a Blizzard, and sets up another Toxic. And then he tanks the next Blizzard and deals big damage with a Rock Slide. We protect on the next turn for Lefty's recovery, and then Frostlass falls to poison. Drifloon is up next, and it sets up an Amnesia, and we hit it with a Toxic. Then protect for Lefty's and poison damage. I don't know why it keeps going for Amnesia. It must not know that we're a mixed Carbink, so after a few more turns, the Drifblim falls, and we defeat Acerola. The final Elite Four member, Kahili, is next with her flying types. She leads off a Skarmory, and we send in Prince Charming. It sets up spikes, and we bring it to the red with a Sparkling Aria. She heals, and then after 2 more attacks, the Skarmory falls. Up next is Mandibuzz, who hits hard with a Brave Bird and survives a Moonblast. We're too weak to stay in, so we switch out to Humpty D, who tanks 2 Brave Birds and then takes it down with the Moonblast. She sends in Crobat. Humpty D dodges a Supersonic and then brings it below half with a Rock Slide. Then we both miss our attacks on the next turn, and the next turn. So we do get some nice recovery, but we get confused here before taking down the Crobat. Next is Toucannon, so we set up a Toxic and take a Beak Blast. She heals off the poison, so we just set up another. Now you know the drill. Protect for recovery and poison damage. We do take big damage from a Supersonic Sky Strike here, sadly, but after another attack and another protect, Toucannon falls to the poison damage. Out last is her Oricorio, which once again confuses Humpty D, but he pulls through and knocks it out with a Rock Slide, defeating Kahili. That just leaves us with one final challenge, the battle that decides the first champion of the Alola region, against none other than the Masked Royale himself, Professor Kukui. He leads off with Lycanroc, and we send in Pinocchio. He sets up Stealth Rock, and we don't quite get the one-shot with a Giga Drain. We read Kukui like a book here, predicting the switch to Decidueye, and we switch out into Alice, who thanks to Disguise can survive one attack and then take out the Decidueye with a Shadow Claw and a Shadow Sneak. Up next is her Magnezone, which we really have no good answer to, and Alice knows what must be done, and breaks Magnezone sturdy before sacrificing herself to a Flash Cannon. Prince Charming comes in next and slams the Magnezone with an Oceanic Operata. Next up is Braviary, which sets up a Tailwind, and our first Ice Beam brings it right about to half, so it's a damage roll to kill with the next. And we get it. Braviary goes down and Lycanroc comes in. Kukui wastes a full restore, and we knock it out with a Sparkling Aria. Up next is the beastly Snorlax, and we don't have a good answer for this either. We try for some freeze hacks here with the Ice Beam, but we don't get it, and our beloved starter goes down. It does secure the safe switch in for Pinocchio, and all it can do is set up a Leech Seed before getting destroyed by a critical hit Heavy Slam. It's not looking good for our team or our chances. Granbull comes in and does good damage with Brick Break and manages to survive a Heavy Slam. So Granbull is finally able to take down the Snorlax, but sadly, she also falls after taking a Blizzard from the Ninetales. In comes Humpty D to try and save the day, but misses a Toxic due to Safeguard. We protect for recovery and to drain Blizzard PP and then hit hard with a Rock Slide. We repeat the same strategy again, surviving one more Blizzard, and this is it. We only have one more Rock Slide. If Humpty D misses this, the run is over. It's all up to him. He survives one last Blizzard and connects. Humpty D did it. And that is how I completed a hardcore Nuzlocke of Pokemon Sun using only fairy types. And thus, our fairy tale comes to an end. Our hero completed their journey and became the first ever champion of the Alola region. And if you want to see more hardcore Nuzlockes, click right here.